Funding for This Is Nashville comes from you, our listeners, and Music City Prep Clinic, Nashville-based provider for PrEP and offering comprehensive sexual health services in an environment designed to be safe, professional, and shame-free. Learn more at musiccityprep.org.
I'm Mary Mancini, sitting in for Khalil Ekalona, and this is Nashville. As a producer, one of my favorite things to do behind the scenes is brainstorm with the team and try new ideas. This year, we introduced a weekly call-in segment called Your Turn to Talk. This is Nashville is and always has been a community-driven show, and our goal is to engage listeners through diverse topics and guests. With this weekly call-in show, we get to connect with you in real time. We've tackled subjects like media consumption, overdose awareness, immigration, voting, and navigating a complex healthcare system. A highlight is hearing the thorough and thoughtful answers from our panel of knowledgeable guests. Another is the spontaneity of a conversation taking off into an unexpected direction because of a particularly insightful question. And still another is hearing Khalil ask what always turns out to be an essential follow-up. We launched the call-in show in August with a panel of guests assembled to help navigate the emotions and responses brought on by an intense election cycle. Dr. Heather Alesh, a licensed clinical psychologist, Dr. Dana Nelson, an American Studies professor, and Dr. Nicole Alexander Floyd, a political scientist, shared their advice on managing election anxiety. Let's listen to a few calls from Where Are We Going and How Did We Get in This Basket?
Ian, thank you for calling and thank you for holding. What's your comment, my friend?
Hey, good morning, sir. So I'm an active duty service member. Been in 14 years. I do completely believe social media has drawn a wedge between us. I love when I'm able to sit down and talk to somebody and put my personal opinions aside and their personal opinions aside and just have good conversation. I do truly enjoy when I don't care what your creed, race, ethnicity, religion is. If I can sit down and you and I can have a civil discussion, I really believe we need more of that, sir.
All right. Thank you so much. Dr. Alesh, would you like to respond to Larry's comment?
Yeah, no, thank you for that. I think that that's a really good point, that we've really moved away from these interpersonal interactions and moved into our little silos, whether that be in social media or in actual day-to-day life. Something I suggest to folks all the time if they're feeling lonely and disconnected is to intentionally go to a space that makes you uncomfortable or different. Like if you've never taken the bus before, take the bus and don't be on your phone. Say hi to a stranger. See what happens. You're only on the bus for 5 minutes, maybe. That's fine. But now you've stepped out of your comfort zone and had a new conversation.
We're going to go to a call from Betsy. Betsy in Nashville. What's your comment?
Oh, hi. Thank you for this great conversation today. My comment basically is I'm an older person. I'll say I was graduated from high school in 1973. So I do remember some of the violence of the 60s and so forth and so on. So those are big concerns for me, absolutely. But mainly what I wanted to say today was that I wish we would focus on educating ourselves and especially in our schools, teaching civics and helping people understand how our system of government actually works and why it's important to vote locally and what are the things we can do to learn how to have conversations and actual debates without devolving into personal attacks. I think it's just a skill that we no longer teach, and we are absolutely crying out for it in terms of the way we've become so polarized. So that's basically what I wanted to add in.
I appreciate you adding that in, Betsy. Thank you. Thank you so much for calling and giving us that really poignant insight. We're going to move on to another caller. We got Brad in Nashville. Brad, thanks for holding. What's your comment, my friend?
Hey, well, I'm really sort of hurt by the people that are close to me that have such impulsive and toxic political opinions and beliefs that, you know, women who get abortions should be murdered by the state, where we need to deport all illegal immigrants on trains and buses. I find their political beliefs to be dangerous and abhorrent and anti-American, but there's still people that are close to me. And I am wondering, how do I keep my relationships with these friends and family members?
Dr. Alesh?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think this is one that many of us struggle with. And I recommend, so there's some great skills such as nonviolent communication techniques and using some of these ways to engage in uncomfortable conversations with folks. But the key is both parties have to be willing and accountable. And so being able to meet at a space where both parties are willing to engage in those conversations in respectful ways that don't involve personal attacks and name calling. And sometimes that's not the case. Sometimes the other party isn't willing to meet in that way. And that's where sometimes we have to step away and then find other avenues and other ways to have those conversations with folks that are willing to do that.
As you can hear, every week we assemble a panel of knowledgeable guests to answer your questions. But we also learn so much directly from the lived experiences of our callers. In our People, Power, Democracy, and Action episode, caller Carol shared with us why she believed it was important to get involved with causes you care about, and what it was like for her when she took her first step on the road to becoming an activist.
We're going to go to our first call. We got Carol in Nashville. Carol, thank you so much for calling. What is your comment?
Yes, I just believe it's really important, and it's actually a responsibility for everyone to get involved in the causes they feel very passionately about. And I'm talking about the hot topics in our political system, whether it's local or state or federal level. I whine. I do a lot of whining too, but I also do a lot of action. And I think it's good to whine. I think it's good to say, wow, there is stuff I cannot abide with that's going on. So I do, I'm a volunteer comms lead for Moms to Be in Action. So I'm down at the legislature every session, really for the past 7 years. And I'm involved with the Equity Alliance and some other organizations. We kind of intersect a little bit. So at the legislature, I'm in committee sessions, and I'm leading, I'm speaking at rallies or I'm doing other things. But I also care a lot about the local level, and it's important to vote. It's important to know the issues. This is our responsibility, I feel like, being a community member. And then what's going on the federal level. You don't like what's going on in Gaza and Israel, you need to be calling. You need to be calling your representatives in Washington. Send letters, call, get involved in people that really care about this issue on the local level and the state level. But we've got to do more than whine. So there's a lot of stuff to do. There's a lot of stuff to care about. I would say just pick the things that really resonate with you and just take some action, whether small or big, to help create a better future.
Carol, thank you so much for calling and sharing that with us. Let me ask you a question. What was it like when you first got started to be a part of the democratic process outside of voting in the advocacy that you just explained to us? What was going through your mind and what led you to get started in that?
Well, I'm a mom. I'm a mom, and my kids are all grown now, but I've raised my kids here in Nashville in public schools. 2 of them still live here. So for me and with moms, Demand Action, it's like I care about trying to keep people alive, and that would include my own family as well as my community and the people around me. I got involved because a friend said, hey, why don't you do this? And I was like, okay, and that's how I got started. And then I just felt like there were other things that I should pay attention to. I am also a Christian, which has become a very political very politicized, let's say. And I wanted to speak out as a Christian, but maybe surprise people with what my views were and are. So it's been wonderful. I mean, I work too. You know, I have a job.
Yeah.
I actually have 3 jobs. But it means a lot to me. It's important. So I do what I can.
All right. Carol, thank you so much for calling us. Really appreciate that.
Shortly before we launched the weekly call-in show, the Supreme Court handed down the decision that granted immunity from criminal prosecution for any official act by the President of the United States. A hot topic, to be sure. Joining us to answer your questions about the controversial decision was John Weil, Dean of the MTSU Honors College and Professor of Political Science. Caller Lisa from Brentwood wanted to know what the decision meant for everyday citizens. Let's take a listen.
Lisa, thank you for calling. What's your comment?
Hi, thank you for taking my call. This has been referred to, I'm not an expert, but having read so many legal scholars talking about the vague language in the decision that then leaves it open to interpretation. And that's a concern. But I think we are looking at it from the legal perspective as opposed to the practical perspective. And I think my question is, if the president, whoever the president may be, decides that they want to enact or act in some capacity that is they consider official capacity, right, which is what the immunity says, if they're acting in official capacity, what does that mean for everyday citizens? Because if I don't know, I could give an example. There's a peaceful protest and it's on an issue that whoever's president doesn't like, and they call out the National Guard and tell them, fine, shoot the protesters. What does that actually mean? Because we can't possibly imagine all the scenarios where this would apply. So as a regular citizen, where do we stand on that? What happens to us?
Thank you for that great question, Lisa.
Well, a lot will depend on the character of who's in the presidential office. We talked about guardrails, and guardrails are there for people who need them. Not everybody, but the founders were very, they believed that power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. And this does open the door to a president who, may not have the character to act in the best interests of the country.
We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll hear more highlights from Your Turn to Talk. Stay with us. This is Nashville.
Funding for This is Nashville comes from you, our listeners, and Music City Prep Clinic, Nashville-based provider for PrEP, and offering comprehensive sexual health services in an environment designed to be safe, professional, and shame-free. Learn more at musiccityprep.org.
I'm Mary Mancini, sitting in for Khalil Ekalona, and this is Nashville. Before the break, you heard a compilation of calls from our Democracy in Action series. Timely conversations, to be sure. Another matter of the moment is the rapid development and gentrification of certain areas of the city, including historic Jefferson Street. The Jefferson Street Historical Society came to us with an idea. Can they come on the show and talk about how, as a collective of community members, businesses, and property owners, they were taking the lead in designing the future of the area? We said absolutely. Joining us were Mosherie Holmes-Jones, Alicia Morozic, and Jordan Harris, all members of the Jefferson Street Historical Society. Let's take a listen.
All right, the phones are lighting up. I want to let you know, if you're on the phones, please hold on, let it ring. We are going to get to you. I'm going to let you do something I never do. I'm going to let you know what we're. I got Keith, I got Jamel, then I got Jonathan. So we're going to come to you, Keith, first. Jamel, thank you for calling, my friend. What are your questions?
Yes, I have a twofold question. The first one, as the downtown district is continuing to expand, how do we stop downtown from consuming what's left of Jefferson Street? And then my second question is as the city continues to make money, how do the speakers see the city fairly compensating those who have been displaced by the city's continuing taking over of Jefferson Street?
All right. Thank you for that.
Okay, so on the first question regarding how do we stop downtown from kind of consuming North Nashville, I think really for me, the opportunity is to highlight that Nashville needs North Nashville. Nashville needs a counterbalance to Broadway. You know, people come into town, they do Broadway, they have a good time, but then they want to do something different. Everybody, you can't do Broadway all day, every day, all week, right? You need somewhere else to go. And that's where I see the importance of North Nashville coming in, and specifically with Jefferson Street. We have the history, but we also have the today, and we have the presence, and we have the access to downtown so that tourists don't have to travel an hour to get here. We're 5 minutes away. But we can provide something that is a diverse, and when I say diverse, I just mean different experience. You know, we have the history, we have the culture that can balance the honky tonks and the country music. And Nashville needs that as tourism grows and booms. In the bookstore, every week people come in because they came to town, they did Broadway, and they're like, I needed to find something else to do. And they find us on the internet, and then they come in and ask us, well, where else can we go? And so that demand is there. And that's going to be very valuable for the city going forward if we can grow ourselves up to be another pillar to the tourist experience.
All right. We're going to go. Thank you very much for that question, Jamel. We're going to move on to Jonathan in Murfreesboro. Jonathan, thank you for holding. What is your question, my friend?
Well, it's twofold. Number one, I have always wondered about the route that Diane Nash took from Fisk to the courthouse, the old courthouse in Nashville, in her build-up to the Freedom Ride. I would suspect that march took place right down Jefferson Street. I think that would be the most logical route, and I think that's a very historic nature of Jefferson Street as well. Just a comment. Number two, is any historic overlay like they have in Germantown being considered? That has protected Germantown's historic nature very well, and it actually skirts Jefferson Street on the south. So I wondered if any of that had been considered as in a historic overlay as to zoning.
Yes, thank you for that, Jonathan. We have. That was our first main endeavor out of the gate. What we learned is that because in the last 20 years we lost 60% of the original buildings, because due to development, we were not able to do a full street historic overlay. We do have endeavors on certain areas, which will be what we call that Arts District, where Cassie Gardner is, including Fisk Jubilee. And of course, Fisk as a university has a couple different things, but we're trying to get a corridor within the street since we don't have the original building. So it would probably start at about 14th and go all the way to 2028. And that would include the historic Citizens Bank, the oldest black bank in America, over 100 years. And so we're trying to just make sure that we can, that's one of our strategies, but we cannot do the whole street, which ideally we wanted to, but we can't.
All right. Thank you so much for that call, Jonathan. We're going to go to a call in Jerome. Real quick, Jerome is in North Nashville. I think I know which Jerome this is. Jerome, what's your comment, my friend?
What's going on, man? Look, I got a question. What can native Nashvillians like myself, native North Nashvillians like myself, do to promote the growth of Jefferson Street and the future of Jefferson Street?
I'll take that one. Yes. So what I think about is that, when you spend your money, you vote. And where money is being spent, then investment follows. So, and also, you don't need to spend your money blindly. You can, because we have small businesses, you can talk to us. You can come and say, hey, I like what's going on and it could be better. And just encourage that consistency, and then bring people and highlight what good times you have. And that's what we're kind of doing. That's definitely the work Alicia was doing with this cultural crawl, activating the spaces in the neighborhood so that people have a reason to go the first time, and then can discover the reasons why they can go the second and third time. So I think the core of keeping business open is customers. And as we, grow and seek to improve, that input from customers and from residents like yourself is valuable.
Timothy, you are on the line with us. Thank you for calling, Timothy. What's your comment?
Thanks for the opportunity to be on the call. I'm just excited to hear about North Nashville being celebrated. And as a former resident of North Nashville and now still living here in the city, I'm really eager to find out how it is that we can amplify what's happening on Jefferson Street and how we can support these upcoming celebrations. I know that we just got past the celebration for the North Nashville, at Hadley Park for African Street Festival. I'm sure that there will be other festivals that are coming up. How can we as a community come out and support?
All right, that's a great question. Thank you, Timothy.
Yes, Tim, thank you for calling in. Number one thing, Nashville's a Facebook town. Share the events. Follow Historic Jefferson Street Historical Society. We're posting events. The events are shared on these pages. I mean, we have some of the most iconic events happening: African Street Festival, TSU Homecoming. We think we have a Holiday Village coming in the fall, Culture Crawl. These events are being posted. We want to share you with your organizations, with your workers. A lot of times people don't take it to the office. Take it to the office for me, because everybody who's in the mix in, let's just be honest, Black Nashville may see it in the 7-layer cake of what Black Nashville is. But I want you to bring it to the office. Share with that coworker who's like new to town, or the one who's like, I didn't know they had that. I mean, Hadley Park is Hadley Park. Everybody knows Hadley Park, but getting to Hadley Park is not hard, as people would say. There's 2 exits to get to Hadley Park. So there's so many events happening. There's even Jazz in the Park on Saturday mornings for the kids. There's a lot of things happening on Jefferson Street and off of Jefferson Street. So I think it's about sharing with our new friends and our new natives so they can help us to amplify. That'll be a good way.
We have to take a short break. When we come back, we'll hear calls from the show we did just last week about the transit referendum. Stay with us. This is Nashville. I'm Mary Mancini, sitting in for Khalil Ekalona, and this is Nashville. One of the most exciting things about our call-in show is that we cover current events. A local issue that's on everyone's mind is transit and the referendum that's on the November ballot. As part of WPLN's ongoing coverage, This is Nashville assembled a panel of guests with in-depth knowledge of the proposal. Joining us to answer your questions were Cindy Abrams, WPLN's Metro reporter, Ashley Northington of Moving Forward of Middle Tennessee, and Professor Craig Phillip, director of Vanderbilt University's Research Center for Transportation and Operational Resilience. The phones lit up.
Kathleen, thank you so much for calling. What's your question or comment?
Well, first, thank you so much for presenting this. It's very timely, and I joined specially today and made this a kind of a must-listen as I prepare to vote. But my question for the group is, who is going to be managing this project from an infrastructure point of view? We have had nothing of this kind of scope in Nashville, and I'm concerned about how this project is going to be managed over the next 15 years. Thank you.
So there will be an umbrella team or an action team within the mayor's office that will manage the implementation and rollout of this plan over the next 15 years. There will also be elements of that plan that will be directly managed by WeGo. And then, as you may know, we have a new Nashville Department of Transportation, and that Nashville Department of Transportation will be managing certain aspects. But overall, there will be a team within the mayor's office that's going to manage that rollout.
Kathleen, how do you feel hearing that news?
Well, I think it's just the typical answer I expect to hear. I'm kind of hoping that they're going to bring in some ringers from the outside of the state of Tennessee who have experience in not only implementing a transportation plan, but growing one. We've got some very serious concerns and issues about how we're going to actually accomplish a lot of these plans. And that goes beyond sidewalks and, it goes beyond the inner corridor versus the outer corridor.
So Diana Alacron, who is leading the Nashville Department of Transportation, is not a Tennessee resident. She is an expert in her field. Michael Briggs, who is in the mayor's office right now, is also an expert in this field of planning and transportation. So in Nashville, I've been on these trips. I've been on these information gathering missions where we have studied and looked at cities across the country to find out what has worked, what hasn't worked. So trust me, the people who are national experts in their fields have been working with the folks right here in Nashville to build out this plan and think about what might be ahead in the future.
All right.
I would also just note that the kind of the nature of Nashville being behind a lot of our peer cities and in transit is that there are opportunities to look towards those cities. I sat in on a virtual session a couple months ago that was southeastern cities sharing their experience of developing bus rapid transit, a component of this plan. So I'd be interested to see how Nashville leaders kind of look to our peer surrounding cities for guidance.
We're going to go to DeMarie in Nashville. DeMarie, thank you so much for giving us a call. What's your question or comment?
So I wanted to ask about the 0.5% sales tax. Is that going to, once it's instituted, if we vote it in, is that going to be a forever tax that we'll always be paying 0.5%, or does it go away?
So I can answer that question. So the sales tax is it's brought. The Metro Council decides whether or not the sales tax will be sunset. So it will be in effect for as long as we have to pay for the funding for the developments that we are going to make in the community. And so we're looking at about 30 years to pay off all of the debt, all of those upgrades. And so at that 30-year mark, we'll make a decision then about whether or not that tax will be sunset.
There won't be a hard stop on it.
No, we at 30 years, it will end the tax. At 30 years, that's when the debt will be paid off. And then council will make a vote about whether or not we want to make some additional improvements or whether or not it will be sunset.
DeMarie, let me ask you, now that you have that answer, how do you feel about that?
I'm a little uncomfortable. I know we have to fund it somehow. I guess I would feel better if we were going to just stop the 0.5% sales tax at the end of the 30 years, if that could be contracted into the agreement, because the average person won't even remember what that is when it was instituted. None of those things will be apparent in 30 years, but to put it in at the beginning would be a really good thing, that it just would stop. Because what you, in essence, doing is deciding whether you're going to add a 1% sales tax to our sales tax at the end of 30 years. And we're only doing it now because we want the transportation system to be better than what it is. That's my concern.
All right. Thank you so much for your call. Really appreciate it. Okay, we're going to go to Lonnie in Sylvan Park. Lonnie, thank you for holding. What's your question or comment?
Well, my comment involves the discussion of tax, but I'm coming at it from a different way. My view of it is that we have spent more money, or we're going to continue to spend more money by kicking the can down the road if we don't pass this on a third time. And I would love to hear what the panel might say about what costs have we incurred because we didn't pass this the last time. I was so frustrated that we had millions of federal funds just sitting there waiting for our city to put into effect, and it didn't happen. And I'll add this to it. I think your listeners should know that the entire inner corridor of Davidson County voted for the last referendum.
So you're implying that the outer corridor didn't vote?
Well, and they benefit from all the tourism tax revenue in the same way that the inner corridor does. But my question is mainly, what are the costs of not passing this? You know what I mean? Because to think about all that millions of federal funding just sitting there ready, just waiting for waiting for the green light, and we didn't get that. And it feels like kicking the can down the road and passing up yet another opportunity for a necessary investment in this city.
You can hear the frustration in Lonnie's voice. Anybody in the panel want to take that?
Lonnie, you use a great metaphor there in talking about waiting for the green light. And we have just opened a transit center, or a traffic operations center in the city just in the last 2 weeks. And I suspect if we had funded one of the earlier projects, we would have that already. And so we are as a city, we are decades behind our peer cities around the country, nearly all of whom, I think it's 46 out of 50, have a dedicated tax devoted to transit and transportation and mobility. And one of the reasons that's so important, and you appropriately identified, is we have not had access to the federal funding, part of which is what we already pay as citizens of the United States to underwrite some of the bigger projects. Many of the new funding streams that were established in this current administration are focused on transportation and mobility, and the city has not had access to those funds because we don't have the dedicated matching dollars which those funding proposals require of the person who's applying for the funds. So I would tick down every one of the elements of this plan and say we are more behind than we were when we voted down the last transit referendum. The service improvements of the bus system, the more denser services, the transit centers, the sidewalks, the improvements to signals, all of those things were things we could have focused on 5 years ago, even 10 years ago, if we had had the opportunity to set up a dedicated source of funding as we're having the opportunity to do this month.
All right. Cindy?
Yeah. There are a couple things I would say. We have examples in Nashville of us missing out on federal dollars, like Professor Phillip kind of mentioned. North Nashville Transit Center a few years back did miss out on some federal dollars, which kind of delayed its opening until the city was able to get state funding that allowed it to open. So that is a key part of the plan, is establishing a local match makes us more competitive for federal funds, especially those that have been put in place under the bipartisan infrastructure law, which is set to expire in 2026. So if the referendum is not approved, those are federal dollars that we may not be able to access. I would also say, I think we got a question about the cost of the current plan, which on the ballot says $3.1 billion. There's another number that's being batted around that came up in the required financial audit. That is a higher number, and that number factors in inflation. And I think that's something to consider. As since 2018, the last time a referendum was not approved, costs have increased. And so if this is delayed down the line, naturally, costs will be higher.
Thank you so much for your call. We got other ones to get to, like Melanie in South Nashville. Melanie, thank you for calling. What's your question or comment?
So I've always been told that Nashville's like a wagon wheel, and so we have our major corridors that come in, but we don't have very many roads that go around. But I'm an Uber driver, and I take people from Antioch to Brentwood all the time on Old Hickory Boulevard. And so just wondering if anybody's thought about the bus routes that need to go around town, not just in and out.
Yeah, well, one of the features of this plan is the creation of 12 transit centers, as I think was mentioned earlier, and how they expect the services that the WeGo provides related to those transit centers is that there will be many new bus routes that will connect those centers, and they're not in the downtown. So you are exactly right that one of the best things about Nashville is that we have 3 interstate highways that bisect our community. We're one of the 4 or 5 different metro areas in the country that have that both blessing and curse. And our system has, and this goes back to the days of the trolleys, which were primarily hub and spoke into the downtown. But it's been true of our road system, and trying to create a transit network that can work against that is a challenge. And the creation of transit centers and the funding to create new bus routes that will connect one transit center to another is an important feature of the plan.
All right. Thank you for that, Professor. And thank you, Melanie, for giving us a call. Okay, we're moving on to Pat in Nashville. Pat, thank you for calling. What is your question or comment, my friend?
I was actually calling to verify some information, and maybe the professor hit on this earlier. When we pass this transit tax, it opens the door for an evolving transit solutions, because so much federal government money that could be used here. The first thing we have to do is check some of these boxes. And I heard that from some organizers in my neighborhood, and I wanted to verify that that's true. There's a pool of money that can help us further someday, but we need this as a first step.
Pat, thanks for the question and comment, and that is exactly right.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Professor, and thank you, Pat.
And thank you for tuning in this hour. And on behalf of the This is Nashville team, thank you for calling in with your comments and questions during our Your Turn to Talk episodes. This is Nashville is a production of Nashville Public Radio, and you're hearing this show because of your support. Today's episode was produced by me, Mary Mancini. It was directed by Tasha A.F. Lemley. Our technical director and board operator is Liv Lombardi. The masterminds behind our theme music are LaRange and Namir Blade. Listen back at thisisnashville.org or wherever you get your podcasts. And the conversation doesn't end here. Tweet us at This Is Nashville and find us on Instagram. And you can also call and leave us a message at 615-751-2500. This is Nashville. I'm Mary Mancini. We'll see you tomorrow, everybody. And as Khalil says, be good to each other.